you would have copies of the session after um, this webinar. So just wanted to flag with everyone. So a good day to everyone. This is Erica Yage. I'm from the Philippines, but currently based in Australia, taking my master's in Peace and Conflict Studies at the University of Queensland as part of the Rotary Peace Fellowship Program. I'm also part of the Asian Youth Peace Network and the global focal point for SDG 16 at the UN Major Group for Children and Youth. And I will be your facilitator for this day, for this webinar. So thank you everyone for joining us today. First of all, a happy International Youth Day to everyone. So the theme for this year is Transforming Education, which highlights the effort to make education more relevant, equitable, and inclusive for all. And in solidarity for this theme, in our work on Youth for Peace, we'll be discussing more on a tool that we've been using and will be using in the future that really puts forward the agenda of Youth for Peace. So education is not really just constricted in the four walls of the classroom. It could be done informally and virtually nowadays, especially in the rise of the network society, thus bringing us all together here. So before we go deeper, just a little bit of rules so that we would have a nice flow of conversation. May we request everyone to mute their mics, but there will definitely be time for everyone to send in their questions or unmute their mics to also join the conversation. With that, let me call on Mridul Upadhyay, who is the Asia Coordinator of UNOY, or United Network of Young Peace Builders, who is also the co-chair of the thematic working group of Youth, Peace, and Security in Asia Pacific Interagency Network on Youth, to welcome us and give a brief explanation of the toolkit. So, Mridul, hand it over to you.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you very much. Hope you can hear me well.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Yeah, so this is Mridul. I'm currently calling from India. About this webinar. So we celebrate International Youth Day on 12th August, and this time the theme is transforming education. So we thought that UNOY has been already working with young people, youth trainers, and other agencies to work meaningfully with young people. So why don't we merge this idea and bring to you something which might be useful in your work. So let's say if you are planning a training program for young people, or let's say if you are planning a training program on conflict transformation, then this particular tool can be very useful for you. So this toolkit, Youth for Peace toolkit, was developed last year in consultation with a lot of UNOY members, a lot of youth trainers and experts from all over the world. And we have our main author, Ms. Romeral, who will be sharing her thoughts with you in this webinar. What is very specific about this toolkit is that it's a youth-friendly and conflict-sensitive toolkit. When we say youth-friendly, all of these modules has been captured in a way and then tested with a lot of young people to see the people who are having very less information about the context, about the training program, but they really want to learn. Then this toolkit has a very systematic way of covering the concepts, the peace building principles, and also some of the modules which you can use. So yeah, this is a space where you can learn from this resource in a very systematic way. And that's why we find this toolkit little different than some of the other resources on peace education which are available. But of course, this toolkit has been created in consultation with a lot of other resources which are available all over the world. You will see in the reference there are so many other toolkits which has been reviewed to create this toolkit. I would not go deeper into it because we already have the main author who will be sharing about it. The idea is to make this toolkit available to you, so that all the beginners and intermediate youth trainers and educators in the field of peace building can use it. And this space is actually to help you understand what this toolkit entails. And of course, we'll be developing more webinars around it to help you excel into this particular resource and use it in your future work. So back to you, Erika. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that very nice overview, Mridul. It got me really excited to learn more about it. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker for this evening, Ms. Romeral Ortiz Quintilla. She is a committed peace builder practitioner who is truly inspired by the role that youth plays in preventing violence and promoting peace. Since 2009, she started her journey as a youth and peace advocate. She was part of UNOY Youth Advocacy Team advocating for the adoption of UNSCR 2250 or United Nations Security Council Resolution 2250, which is on youth, peace, and security. She has been involved in initiatives related to youth empowerment in peace building, from youth led organizations to international institutions like the UN, EU, Council of Europe, in Europe, Latin America, the Caribbean, North America, and Asia. She's a senior trainer and has delivered related trainings and consultations on youth and peace and on localizing UNSCR 2250. So she has done so much work, and we're really lucky to have her tonight. Um, so I hand it to you, Romeral. Maybe I'll start with one question. Is that okay?
Yes, of course. My pleasure.
Hello?
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you for being here. I have one question. First question is like, who is this toolkit for?
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you, Erica, and also Mridul, first of all, for the invitation and for organizing. I'm really happy to see so many people and also some people I know. So thank you. Thank you first for this opportunity, for the space and time. I'm also not sure I will put my camera for a moment because I think it's also nice to put some faces behind the voices. So I don't know if I will keep it for the whole time, but at least for the beginning. Um, so yes, for whom is this toolkit? So basically, the toolkit was thought for youth trainers, so trainers who are working with young people and who really want to start implementing or review the work they are doing around trainings. So basically, I would say the main focus is, or the main target is for trainers who either are starting their work in implementing, delivering trainings and sessions around youth and peace building, conflict transformation, and transforming narrative. But it could also be for trainers who have already an experience or who has quite a large experience, but who have not been working on the non-formal methodology, for instance. Because as I will be explaining this toolkit, we really focus on how to deliver sessions and trainings based on the non-formal learning methodology. So maybe there is we have seen in some part of the world it's not that common to actually use this kind of methodology. So that could also be an opportunity for those trainers who actually wants to kind of try new methods, try new ways to approach the youth and peace building topics in trainings and capacity building programs. So that's about to whom it's address this toolkit.
Oh, thank you. So, given that it's very innovative in its way of educating, what's in the toolkit? What can we expect from, yeah, what's in it?
Okay. So for the funny story, also now that okay, we will share all the secrets from UNOY, but I remember very well when we started with this toolkit, it was meant to just have few modules around peace building, conflict transformation, transforming narratives. And then as we started discussing with the editor, with the UNOY team, I was a bit like, okay, I think we should go a little bit further. Why don't we share also about the methodologies to use? Why don't we share about the key topics and the meaning of the key concept behind peace building, conflict transformation, etc. So suddenly it became quite of this big toolkit as we were doing the draft, and we got a bit stressed, like, okay, this is going a bit too far from what we initially intended. So this is also why we kind of broke down the toolkit into four main parts that I will be briefly presenting to you. And for that, I thought of sharing my screen so that you can also see directly on the toolkit. So I hope everyone can see my screen at the moment. So also to mention, this toolkit, it's an online toolkit. So there is a PDF version where you can download it, and of course you can print it. But basically, it's meant to have it online and to be able to access the different parts very quickly. So maybe to start with the beginning, where to find the toolkit, if you go on the UNOY website, you will find the resources part here. And then you will be able to click on this Youth for Peace training toolkit. So as you can see, hopefully you can see it well, we have these four main parts that I was saying. We have the first part, which is on key concept. So basically we review concept as what's the difference between violence and conflict, what is peace, what is conflict transformation, what is, for instance, 20 to 50 resolution, what is transforming narratives, which are the different narratives we can have out there, what is the role of identity, what is the role of nonviolent communication, peace journalism. So we have some key concepts around the topics of conflict transformation and peace building. And I think, and I'm going maybe to some other parts, but in that part, it's not about conflict is this, violence is this, and those are the main theories, because we thought you can find all this information in many ways, in many, I don't know, many other manuals, in, I don't know, researchers, in academia, etc. But while we give you an understanding of the key concept, we directly also give you how to actually bring this knowledge in a session or in a training room. So, which is the activity that you can do with your group to actually make them understand the difference between conflict and violence? So, as we explain you the difference of conflict and violence, we directly go into sample activities, as you can see, there, and we directly put you also which should be the key learnings for your group after the activity you did, and some practical tips and other resources. So that's about the first steps, the first part of the toolkit. So if we go into the concept, I really want to highlight that even in that part, you can already find ways of implementing and how to deliver those messages, those key knowledge to your group. Then we have a second part, which is on designing and implementing your activities. So basically there we go more into the methodology part. So what is non-formal education? What is peace education? What's the difference between methodologies and methods? We share with you basically how we usually from UNOY have been delivering trainings, how we use a lot of experiential learning, how we make sure not only to promote certain knowledge, but also skills and values. So we go a little bit into what's the methodology behind that we have been using. And then we go into very practical, sorry, I can hear me the background, so I'm just muting some people. Sorry, I hope it's okay. And then we go, as I was mentioning, into the design part. So how do you start from opening a call for participants? How do you make sure you choose the best training venue? How do you make sure you have a proper learning goals for your capacity building program or your training sessions? How do you do your program flow? Which topics should come at the beginning, which others should come later? How do you make sure that you have a good dynamic within your team? Which are the different roles? What do you do if you have, let's say, a group of participants with different languages? How do you prepare, for instance, in terms of, is it a training that you are going to have residential, where, for instance, you have your participants staying overnight? or what happens if they have to go back every day to their home, or what happens if you do it online. So the different also formats that you can have in the trainings. And that comes also with these practicalities. So very concrete, how do you pass the information to your participants, how do you prepare on the logistics, etc. So that second part is very much into the design and implementation of your training, regardless of the topics you are using, from methodology to the learning objectives to the logistics. So that's about the part two of the training toolkit. And then actually in that part we started we started also reflecting a lot on which are the skills and principles, which are the core values we should have when we actually deliver trainings in peace building. Because it might sound very obvious what I'm going to say, but you would be surprised um, how sometimes we are actually not aligned with the core values that we pretend to promote in the trainings. So let's say we are talking about the different forms of violence, and we are talking about violence that we are doing a structural level against environment, for instance. And then it happened that in the training, you are using plastic water bottles. So how do you make sure that you are practicing and you are walking the talk, basically? So that has been a reflection that I feel it's very important in the work we are doing. And it's not the same to yourself practice nonviolent communication, make sure that the way you are preparing for your training, it's also promoting gender, it's also promoting inclusion of minorities. So how can you ensure that at least you have those core values and principles in mind? That's one part. And then also, how do you deal with group dynamics? What do you do when you are in front of a group of participants who are not talking, not replying to your questions when you try to prompt a discussion? What do you do if a conflict occur in your training room? What do you do if you have very strong personality and you have some participants that are overpowering others? So we are giving from experience a little bit on some tips on how to deal with all those group dynamics. And then the last part is this program and session outline. So we give you directly templates of program samples of 1 day workshop and a 7 days training program that you can use directly like that if it makes sense to your context and to the needs of your community. Or you can of course adapt, but it's something that you can go directly to part 4 and you can have an idea of a training program on those topics, and every session some activities that we propose and that could be useful hopefully in the training you want to deliver. So that's about the 4 parts of the toolkit. As I was explaining, it was not meant initially to be that comprehensive, I would say, but hopefully it captures the needs that we heard from UNOY member organization and also from experts and youth trainers with whom we had consulted before starting actually the toolkit, and who kind of share with us also the need to have a more vast training toolkit that could address those different parts. So yes, that's about it. I don't know if I'm going, I don't know, super fast, if it's I don't know, maybe a lot of information, because of course I've been working on this toolkit for so long that I know it almost by heart. So Erica, also let me know if you think I should rephrase or spend a little bit more time on some parts, or any of you on the chat also feel free to comment if you feel something was unclear.
Yeah, no, it's actually pretty good. Like, thank you so much for sharing. And it's really excited to see this in practice. One question that I have is that, have you had experience in implementing or prototyping this toolkit in practice already? And what are the feedback or like good tips that you could share in implementing it directly?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so I think one point that it's important is that the toolkit, while it was developed, we actually tested already. So what you are seeing now online has already been tested. Either it had been tested in previous experience with that we had within UNOY, or it was tested with the particular purpose of this training toolkit. So we had the training being tested in Democratic Republic of Congo, in Colombia, in Bosnia Herzegovina, in Sri Lanka, um, in many parts of the world where we had participants who took part in a training of trainers of UNOY or who were part of the UNOY network, who actually took some of the sessions, sometimes a full day, sometimes longer, and who actually tested with young people. And we had a thorough follow-up with each one of those facilitators and trainers to see their main feedbacks. So for instance, it was very interesting to see that we could complement, no? So that we realize at that moment, okay, we should also focus in these group dynamics. What do you do when you have participants who are very silent? So we added on those things, for instance. Or what we also did was like certain activities work very well in certain contexts, but they had some risk in other contexts. So as Mridul was saying at the beginning, it was very important for us that it was conflict sensitive, no? So we have, for instance, some activities where we propose the activities, but then in the tips that we have right after the explanation of the activity and how to deliver it, we say be careful or be aware if you are, let's say, in a conflict setting, this activity might be sensitive because it might open or it might remind some of the participants some traumas, or it might open some very sensitive topics. So we are also giving you some tips on how to deal or some alternative to that activity. So indeed, the training toolkit has been tested, and I think that's the main point why we can also say that it is conflict sensitive, because it has been tested in very different parts of the world with very different contexts, with very different needs, a group of participants. So that's an important point, and also to mention that. We are open for feedbacks till now. So if you are testing the toolkit, let's say tomorrow, if you are so like motivated after this call or anytime soon, you will actually be able to also send feedbacks to us, and we'll be happy to review it. Since it's on online training toolkit, that's also why we are very open to any suggestions or feedbacks that you may have.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful. And yeah, having it practiced in different contexts is really a um, good way to make sure that it's really conflict sensitive. And so maybe we could open the floor now for questions to the group. So please feel free to unmute yourselves, or if you have any like comments or suggestions, and also share experiences if you've already used the toolkit, that would be also nice to hear.
Also, Erica, just one comment, because I see from Wilbert a question on the chat box. So while maybe some other people are thinking of questions, I can just read that one and reply from
Sure,
SCI.
yeah.
So
Yep.
Wilbur from SCI, I don't know which branch or the headquarter of SCI, but also to mention that we had feedbacks from SCI. So that's nice to see someone from the organization. So you're asking, are there future training of trainers plan on the toolkit? So as far as I know, and maybe Mridul can also reply on that one, but there is no specific training plan for it. But we did have some requests from some youth-led organization, from some youth in different parts of the world who saw the training toolkit and thought, okay, we want your support in actually train our youth trainers in how to deliver these kind of programs. So we are now under discussion with some youth-led organization who do have requested for this kind of TOTs. So I think if that's something that you would be interested with your organization, I'm sure UNOY would be happy to discuss it. From my side, I'm always super happy to have bilateral calls to explain more in details. I have done this for some people who say, okay, I need to deliver a session on these topics. What do you think is the best from the toolkit? Which are the activities you would recommend? So I've done this, so I'm happy to support. That's an online support, but if there is no other chance to meet like in person, then that's always there for sure. Yes, I don't know, Mridul, if you want to add something on those TOTs.
Yeah, just want to add a little bit. So, um, this is also a reason why we are having this webinar, because we feel that we have this toolkit, but we might not be able to reach out to every young trainer in the world. We might not be able to organize training of trainers for everyone. This was also some thought in the mind when we were developing this toolkit, to make it at a level where it is easy for the people who are having some understanding of training programs, that they can understand the content, and then they can start developing the training programs by their own. But like you said, we are happy to help you and find this, but we will be some more sessions. So we will be telling you more details after the webinars. Let's say if you are planning, if you, your team, or some more young people with you who are planning to organize a training program or want to get trained, then maybe one suggestion will be that you review this training toolkit in next, let's say 10 days, and we'll be developing another webinar by the end of this month. And you can join this session with your questions so that we can help you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you so much, Henry. So we have one more question. We have two more, and both of you, thank you so much for giving us the answers. So we have Esan Osmani. Um, the question is there any other seminar or webinar in the matter of peace building? If yes, give them the link. Definitely, Redo will share, and UNOY will share if there is. But is there any in the coming near future aside from this one? Redo or wrong?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So, do you mean on different topics or on the same webinar? Like on the same webinar, we are planning to organize two live sessions in English, and then session in Arabic, Spanish, and French.
Riddle, you're
Then
breaking up a little. Sorry. Hello, Riddle, are you still there? Okay, I think we lost Riddle. But yeah, definitely will ask more if there are future webinars happening. They will be posted on the UNOY website or on the UNOY Facebook page. So please follow the different social media that UNOY has. And then we have another question from Morgan. Yes, so Morgan's question is maybe you could inform us on future plans of youth-led organizations in Africa. Do you think we can organize a conference on UNSCR and come up with a regional network to spearhead the enactment on the action plan of 2250 from Morgan joining from Kenya, Nairobi. Hi, Morgan. So giving it back to Romero and Rigo.
Thank you. I am not sure Mridul is I mean, if it's working for him. But I guess, well, I cannot really talk on the plans from UNOY because I guess that should be more Mridul who could say. I'm sure there will be opportunities to discuss much more about the localization of 20 to 50 and how to make it a regional plan, etc. So I think there are two things I can mention on that. Maybe one is to see with UNOY because there are some regional initiative, etc., for Africa in particular. So I think that's maybe something to discuss and see what's already happening. There is also African Union working quite a lot around 20 to 50, etc. So also to align and not to duplicate. So I think something maybe to discuss further with the UNOY team in general also, because there is quite an understanding of what's happening in there, and then also what can be done and the opportunities for collaboration. Then to go back a little bit on the toolkit, what I can mention is that on the toolkit, you can find on 20 to 50 and how to have session on 20 to 50 that can be delivered to young people. So this is something that personally I've been working quite a lot because I've been part of UNOY youth advocacy team in advocating for 20 to 50, then in localizing 20 to 50 in very different contexts, and then in delivering sessions to raise awareness to young people, but also to youth institutions in different countries on what is 20 to 50, what is important of the resolution, how to implement it, how to localize it, how to mainstream it in national action plans, etc. So I think the toolkit, while it's not directly on how to localize 20 to 50, because UNOI has other resources on that you can find on their website as well. There is a mention on 20 to 50 and 2419, which is the second, let's say, resolution that came around youth participation in peace building processes. And that says, how can you approach 20 to 50 and some tips around, especially if you are in countries where the UN is not a credible institution, for instance. No, so I have had experience where if you start a session talking about 20 to 50, you are going to lose all the credibility among your participants because the UN is not legitimate in the country, or is not an institution that young people recognize as credible because of different contexts. So we also give you some tips of how you can start actually talking about the youth leadership in advocating for certain agendas, and then actually showing that 20 to 50 was a resolution that was mainly and in the vast majority advocated by young people around the world, and how youth agency, youth empowerment can have actually a very concrete impact in influencing international policies. So that's another way of actually going towards explaining what's 20 to 50, because at the end of the day, there is no, how can I say, there is the main goal is not about 20 to 50. The main goal is about youth participation and meaningful participation in peace building. So how can you go around that, and how can you present, how can you motivate the youth groups in getting involved in peace building activities in your communities? That's something that the toolkit is kind of approaching, and also giving you some tips on how to do it. Also, just to mention, sorry, Erica, I'm maybe taking a bit longer, but two things, because I also got a question on the private chat that I can take if that's fine. But to mention also that the toolkit has currently been translated into Arabic, French, and Spanish, because there was this need, of course, that we are not all speaking English. This is not the reality for everyone to be able to read or to deliver trainings in English, and it's not the reality for many countries. So hopefully you will have very soon online the Arabic, French, and Spanish version of the toolkit. Then I'm taking this question that I got on the private chat asking, hello, what kind of peace building project would you recommend in a multi-religious communities to capture the interest of the youth? So very good question. I don't know if I have like a magical answer for that. I wish. But I think what I can share from the toolkit is that we would really recommend to always take a needs assessment. So I think while the toolkit is very useful because you can directly go to one part and click, and you have a session outline and you have activities that you can directly implement, that doesn't mean you should not prepare correctly. And that doesn't mean only in terms of facilitation skills. It also means about what is your objective. So what's your objective with that multi-religious community? Is it to have in the same group young people from different religions that usually wouldn't speak together? Then you need to start from team building activities, maybe more than going into the topic of peace building. You need to create an environment that is safe and that your participant can feel confident to talk about certain topics. Being in front of certain groups, could be religions, could be ethnicities that they usually wouldn't speak with. So I think the first step would be to do this needs assessment and context analysis. So what's my objective in front of the context I'm having and I'm facing? And based on that, what do I want to achieve? And I think then you can check on the toolkit and see, okay, there is, for instance, in my needs assessment, I realize different religious group, they are not respecting each other because they think, I don't know, based on identities. So we have in the toolkit, we do have, for instance, like a part on identity. So how can you discuss identity? Or you also have a lot on discrimination stereotypes. So if you realize there is a lot of misunderstanding around the different religious groups, you can have some session about what is stereotyping, why stereotyping can lead to discrimination, can lead to racism, etc. So you could have some session around those topics that might be very valuable. But I think the most important is that you have a thorough needs assessment or a very good understanding of what is the context and what I want to do. And then in the toolkit, probably, hopefully, you will find some useful session around that. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Romerel, for the very comprehensive answer. And I feel like you've already touched a little bit on the next question that we have on the chat box, which is from Aurelie. So she asked if there is any concrete examples of trainings you gave along with this toolkit, and I just like to have a clear portrait of a concrete way on how this guide is helping us to do training. So you've touched a little bit. Do you think yeah, could you add more, maybe some of the things that we could also share on concrete examples?
Sure. So I can give examples. So we had very different kind of trainings where this toolkit was based from. So we had from even just sessions. So in the context of different trainings, we had some youth trainers who did a session on what is the difference between conflict and violence, for instance, and why conflict is not negative, and why, if I have a different opinion with somebody else, that doesn't mean I need to end up in a fight or using violence. So sometimes, depending on the need, depending on the expertise or experience of your group, you can have just a session very basic on what is conflict, what is violence, what is peace, for instance. Then we can go into, we had also one workshop of 1 day, no, 1 day workshop. So we don't even call it training, because usually 1 day, it's more like raising awareness level, no? So we can go a little bit more in depth into the basic concept. So you can go a little bit more into what is conflict, what is violence, what is peace building, what is conflict management, how do you manage conflict, which are the different ways that conflict can escalate, in which moments you could actually prevent it or like transform it, etc. And then we have what we usually with UNOY would recommend and suggest is to have around 5 or 7 days long training, which we also are very much aware that's not the reality for many countries or many contexts, because of funding, because of availability, because of the culture, because of the possibility of young people to actually go for a training of 7 days, etc. but we still want to advocate for trainings that are longer, because to call a training just 2 sessions or one afternoon, we think it's a bit unfair because we cannot really see the change in attitudes that we are looking for. So it might raise awareness, it might be very useful for the participants to start just opening their mind about, wow, I actually don't need to use violence. I have other tools that can be nonviolent communication, that can be collaboration, that can be dialogue when I'm actually confronted to a conflict. But it would be very rare that they can actually start practicing if you only have like one afternoon with the group. So that's why we have very different formats and days. And when you have a 7 days training, you can go much more in depth into the different topics, in participant actually practicing those skills, in having also a reflection, and with time, hopefully a change in attitudes. So that's some of the formats I can share that we have done. And then on topics, it can go from conflict transformation to transforming narrative to conflict management to peace building, or to leadership also, how it can promote peace building, etc. So we do have a lot of different topics behind.
Thank you so much, Romero. For those who are in the chat, like you can see the link to the toolkit on the chat box, so you can have a scan on it, and if there's something interesting, you can raise the question if you want. For those asking about if there are future training of trainers, Riddle has posted a few webinar series that's happening in different languages as well, so you can check that out for more information on how to move to learn more about the toolkit. And for those asking about opportunities and membership, you can go on to the UNOY website. So we have another question from Vera. Thank you for the very thorough explanation. Has the toolkit been tested in the MENA region?
Yes, so it was tested in Lebanon with Syrian refugees, and it was tested in Palestine as well. So, and I know some people, I think Shadi is now also sharing it on the chat box. I think it has been tested in Tunisia as well. So those are the places I can recall where it has been tested. And we got actually from the test we had in Lebanon a lot of feedbacks also that helped us a lot in reviewing to make it much more conflict sensitive. So yes, it was tested in that region too.
Thank you so much. And yeah, Shadi shared her experience of using the toolkit. Please unmute yourself, Shadi, if you would like to share yourself. But I'd like to read what she wrote. Thank you so much for this call and wonderful toolkit. Peace Mentors, which is her organization, has been using it very often in Iran, even before it was compiled and published. Heart. I also used it a little bit for 2 workshops she facilitated in Tunisia. I have a question which is a little beyond the toolkit. To organize the trainings and events, there has to be logistic preparation, stakeholder mapping, monitoring and evaluation, and funding. What other similar instruments or toolkits do you recommend to help young leaders take care of that aspects of putting together a training?
Okay, so in fact, we can also go directly on the toolkit itself, and I can show you. So for every part of the toolkit, you will find further resources, and we use a lot of. We review a lot of others toolkit manuals to make it as comprehensive as possible, as I was mentioning. And of course, we didn't manage to touch on everything, but at least you have the additional resources where you can find more information. So from actually on monitoring and evaluation, you do have UNOY has some manuals also on those topics that you can also check on their resources tab on their website. But by heart, what I can remember, let me check. Shadi, you say on monitoring evaluation, and there was something else I think you mentioned. I can remember now. But if we go, for instance, on needs assessment, one that I found quite useful was this. I hope you can see my screen, but there is this one, a community needs assessment guide, needs assessment survey, for instance. So how to do a survey, how to prepare for that. So that's one very specific guide that will guide you on actually how to conduct a needs assessment. So this is one that I particularly found very, very useful on the needs assessment side, for instance. Then if we go more into the monitoring and evaluation, other manuals that you can find that we found useful was this one that I was mentioning from UNOY itself, the Designing Learning for Peace, or the Youth Impact for Peace Monitoring, Evaluation and Learning. This one is based on European Youth Organization, but a lot of from there can be applied for other organizations outside Europe, of course. So in every part of the toolkit you will actually find this you want to know more, and then you have you just click on it and you will have more resources, more manual on the specific topic that has been developed and explained before. And then you also have these kind of parts where we also give you some tips, as I was mentioning before. So yes, I hope, Shadi, I replied to your question.
Thank you so much, Romeral. And the toolkit is also downloadable, right? Like it could be available for your use offline if you're going to a site that has no internet. Am I correct?
Yes, and sorry, I realized my screen was not sharing, so I can
Yes.
share it again. Sorry, I hope you can see it now. Maybe someone wrote it on the chat box and I was so focused that I didn't notice. But yeah, just to show you this, you want to know more, so you just click and you will have more resources. And I think I show on the needs assessment before. I will just very quickly, just to give you one example. So if you go here, sorry, the needs assessment. So here you have this one that gives you a direct link to this guide that was quite useful into how to conduct a needs assessment, for instance. Sorry, I had not realized my screen was not sharing. But then, yes, Erica, to your question. So if we go back to the website, where UNOY website, where there is a training toolkit, you have the different parts as I was showing previously, and you can download each part. But you also have here the download your own copy. So there is this offline version. So if you click here, it will open this tab and you have the full training toolkit available, and then you can just save it on your computer. You can print it, up to you how to use it, or you can just download it, the part that is more relevant for you. So yes.
That's amazing. That will be very helpful, especially in places with no or weak internet or no internet at all. So, do we have any more questions? If you're curious more about the toolkit, please feel free to unmute yourself or share in the chat box if you want. Just scanning a little to see if there are more questions that we have related to the toolkit. Um, So, oh, there's one question. Do you recommend a training for multi-religious and multicultural region experiencing religious and cultural terrorism? So this is from Emmanuel. Um,
I
so I'm
think
not.
this is a bit, I'm not sure, but I think that was the, or very similar. Yes, that's almost the same question I
Yeah.
got from Emmanuel on the private chat. So I think I kind
Wow.
of
Yeah.
reply with the needs assessment, etc. But Emmanuel, if you need, feel free to contact me. I put my email. I can just rewrite it on the chat box as well. Um, and then if you have a bit of this needs assessment or analysis of the context, then I can also direct you, okay, these parts or this session might be more relevant for you to implement. But I think the most important, again, sorry if I'm repeating, but it's to be clear on what is the context you are facing, which are the needs, and which are the objectives. So if you go into part 2 of the training toolkit, you can read about how to conduct a needs assessment, how to be clear on the objectives, how to have clear learning objective for your training, and then you choose the topic or the sessions that are responding to those needs and to those objectives. Because if we start the other way around, which is something I've seen so many times in trainings, where you basically decide to do this activity because it's so much fun, but you are not clear on what you want to get out of the activity. Participants might have a lot of fun because it's participatory, because it's experiential learning, but there is no clear learning outside the activity. So that's maybe my strongest recommendation as a trainer. Start from the objective. What is your objective and what do you want to achieve after this session? So be very clear of, after this session, I want participants to be clear on this, and that. And then choose the activity, because you have activities that can be used for different objectives. So that's very my strong recommendation. So that's maybe something that for us to reflect, even for trainers who have longer experience, we tend to repeat activities that we know work well because it engages participants, because it's funny, because it's participatory, but then the learning is a bit lost. And I think that's a very big mistake that we all do, I mean, starting with myself. But it's a risk because participants will remember that it was funny, but that was not the objective we wanted, right? So yes.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I feel like that's really important, getting to know the context and who the audience is and what their expectations are. And of course, the objective of trying to make it more transformational than just being a teacher student kind of perspective. I really learned a lot, and I really enjoyed, like, I took some parts of the toolkit myself and had experience being a participant in it. And one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is the nonviolent communication, which is a good practice of doing it every day rather than, just having it on the training and then not practicing it. So really, it's really exciting how these little trainings could affect one person's life in a very big way. So yeah, if we don't have any more questions for now, Romero is very kind to share her contacts with everyone in case you have any like specific questions, would like to further go deeper into this toolkit, or if there's specific context that you want to discuss with her, please feel free to reach out to her. So thank you so much, Romero, for being so open to everyone, for sharing the process on how this toolkit came to be, and for also sharing your contact to be easily reached to for further exploration of implementing this toolkit on the ground. So aside from this webinar, there will be more series of webinars that will be more in a more specific context, language area that will go deep dive into what the toolkit is about. So after this webinar, there's a second webinar happening on the 28th August at 12 p.m. that will be delivered in the English language. The third webinar will be in Arabic on the 31st of August at 9 a.m. GMT. The fourth webinar will be in Spanish on the 4th September, 5 p.m. GMT. And the fifth webinar will be in French, which will be delivered on the 11th September. So Mridul has shared all of this in the chat box, and I'm sure you'll see the different schedules and links to the webinar on the UNOY Facebook page. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this evening. We're looking forward to see you in all the other webinars, and really looking forward to see how this toolkit could change the world. So thank you very much, and happy International Youth Day to all.
Thank you, Erica and Mridul. Thank you, everyone. Thank you also for the ones who wrote on the chat box that they had piloted in their communities. So very inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you, Erika, and thank you,
Bye.
Umral.
Oh, Yes, thank you, Mridul. Thank you, Romeral. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a nice evening, nice day. Bye bye.
Bye.